In the late 19th century, Palestine was a relatively quiet province of the Ottoman Empire. Census records describe an agrarian society of roughly 600,000 people, overwhelmingly Arabic-speaking Muslims and Christians, living alongside a small religious Jewish minority that had been part of the landscape for centuries. But in the lecture halls of Europe, a new movement was taking shape. Driven by the persistence of European anti-Semitism and violent pogroms, Theodor Herzl argued that Jews were a nation that required a sovereign state. He identified Palestine as the site for this national restoration. This Zionism arrived just as a distinct Arab nationalism was rising within the crumbling Ottoman state. Friction was immediate. Early Zionist land purchases, funded by European capital, often resulted in the eviction of Arab tenant farmers who had worked those plots for generations. By the turn of the century, two separate peoples emerged from the wreckage of old empires, both claiming a national right to the exact same geography. World War I shattered the region. As the Ottoman Empire collapsed, the British military seized control, eventually establishing a formal mandate to govern Palestine. During the war, Britain had secured its regional influence through a series of contradictory promises. In 1917, Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour issued a formal declaration pledging support for a Jewish national home in Palestine. Yet that same document contained a caveat: nothing was to be done that might prejudice the rights of the existing non-Jewish communities, the Arab majority that then made up 90%. This demographic shift triggered a panic. In 1936, Palestinian Arabs launched a massive three-year revolt against both British colonial rule and the growing Zionist settlements. The British military crackdown was absolute. By 1939, they had decimated the Palestinian male population and fractured their political leadership, leaving the community incapable of resisting the next phase of the crisis. By 1947, a bankrupt and exhausted Britain gave up. They handed the responsibility for a radically polarized, heavily armed territory over to the newly formed United Nations. The United Nations proposed partitioning the land into two states. Zionist leaders accepted the plan. Arab leaders rejected it, arguing it violated the majority's right to self-determination and unjustly allocated the best land. Civil war turned into international conflict. In May 1948, Israel declared independence, and 5 neighboring Arab states immediately invaded. Israel secured a decisive victory. By the 1949 armistice, it expanded to control 78% of the mandate. The remaining territories were swallowed by neighbors. Jordan annexed the West Bank. Egypt occupied Gaza, leaving Palestinians stateless. The human cost was what Palestinians call the Nakba, the catastrophe. Roughly 700,000 Palestinians fled or were expelled, becoming a massive, permanent refugee population overnight. 1948 hard-coded the first irreversible dispute into the conflict, a demographic crisis where millions of displaced people demand a legal right of return that Israel refuses to grant. The map was redrawn again in 1967. In just 6 days, Israel launched preemptive strikes that shattered the armies of Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. Israel seized the Sinai Peninsula, the Golan Heights, the Gaza Strip, and the West Bank. For the first time, the entirety of mandatory Palestine was under Israeli control, placing millions of Palestinians under direct military rule. This occupation introduced 2 permanent points of friction: a religious tug-of-war over East Jerusalem, and the beginning of the Israeli settlement enterprise, the ongoing construction of Jewish towns on occupied Palestinian land. Frustration over decades of statelessness eventually boiled over. In 1987, the First Intifada began, a civilian-led uprising of protests and civil disobedience against the military occupation. By the late 80s, the conflict had fundamentally changed. It was no longer a conventional war between regional states, but an asymmetric struggle between an occupying army and a civilian population demanding sovereignty. In 1993, the Oslo Accords offered a moment of hope. Israel and the PLO formally recognized each other's existence, creating the Palestinian Authority to manage interim self-rule in parts of the West Bank and Gaza. But the process had a fatal flaw. It deferred the most explosive issues, the status of Jerusalem, the refugees, and the final borders, to an unspecified future date. While diplomats talked, the map changed. During the years of the peace process, the Israeli settler population in the West Bank doubled, fracturing the territory into a broken archipelago of Palestinian enclaves, separated by Israeli-controlled zones. When leaders finally met at Camp David in 2000 to resolve those deferred issues, the facts on the ground had become so entrenched that a viable geographic compromise was mathematically and politically impossible. The collapse of the peace process triggered the bloody Second Intifada. The political center on both sides vanished, replaced by a new cycle of suicide bombings, military incursions, and the rise of extremists. Israel withdrew its settlers from Gaza in 2005, but when Hamas took militant control of the Strip 2 years later, Israel and Egypt imposed a crippling permanent blockade on its borders. In the West Bank, the occupation hardened. Israel constructed a massive concrete wall and an elaborate system of checkpoints, enforcing a dual legal system that human rights organizations increasingly describe as a reality of apartheid. For 15 years, Gaza lived under a state of siege, a cycle of militant rocket fire followed by disproportionate Israeli bombardments that killed thousands of civilians. That status quo reached a breaking point on October 7, 2023, with the Hamas attacks on Israel and the subsequent invasion of Gaza, a war of unprecedented destruction. The absolute catastrophe left tens of thousands dead, millions displaced, and formal findings of genocide. The violence has reached a level that defies the previous architecture of the conflict. A century of deferred justice and gross power asymmetries locked two competing national claims over a single sliver of land into an agonizing, unresolvable history.